the one ingredient that end of the day shapes digital transformation is data, right? It's an uncomfortable subject, but I think it's a subject that this initiative, G7 to G20, is best placed to deal with. Bear with me for 30 seconds. The first time that the G20 talked seriously about technology, ironically, was in China. 2017 in Hamburg, there was a roadmap that was introduced. In the ministerial meeting in Dusseldorf was the first time that the terminology free flow of information was brought into the lexicon, which in 2019 at Osaka essentially became the DFFT, or the data free flow with trust. Now, clearly, India has a problem with this formulation, and I think for very good reasons. It's not just India, but it's large parts of the global south. Why do we need to take India seriously? End of the day, is the largest open data market in the universe. That's exactly why every big tech company in the world wants to come and use this market space. This initiative, I think, is very well placed to try and deal with some of the incongruities between norm building at the G20 level around data and what the G7 could do. In 2021 at the G7 in the UK, there was an interesting grammar that was brought into the lexicon, which talked about DFFT, but with caveats which took into account national reservations, right? And I think this initiative is well placed to build on that. End of the day, India has a view on data. That view is important primarily because of its market size, largest democracy, largest consumption of GB per capita in the open universe. So that's number one. Number two, very briefly, is in the area of biosafety and security. This is some work that we do, there's a lot of this work that we do at Carnegie India. So what are the norms of biosafety and security? There are none. There are no rules of the road today. And I think perhaps it is this initiative, and functionally we'll have to find a way perhaps as to how the G7 and G20 actually connect. And perhaps RIS is the best place to take the lead as India takes the presidency at the end of this year. But on biosafety and security. Third is on vaccines. We're at or at least we think we're at the taper end of COVID, but perhaps we're not. But there's a general understanding we're at the taper end. With that taper end, a lot of the innovation that was built out for COVID, or for COVID itself, has begun to disappear. So a lot of that innovation ecosystem, which was thriving over the last 2 years, that created diagnostics, that created vaccines, made India the largest manufacturer of vaccines in the universe, right? I think this initiative is very well placed to make sure that that innovation ecosystem can move to other areas of diseases across the world. So how do you build a fund between Gates, CEPI, private sector, Germany, India, to make sure that we are truly prepared the next time a pandemic will come, and in all likelihood, it will come. Next very quick point, and I'll just leave it with a highlight here. We're in the universe of digital currencies. We're also in the universe of cryptocurrencies, which could be terrifying for many and certainly for governments. But on digital currencies, I think there's a lot of alignment that is genuinely possible. So in central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, I think the G7 to G20 is perhaps a very good track to try and figure out how do you align the norms and standards between central banks in different parts of the world as you pivot to these digital currencies. And lastly, is kind of a more self-serving point from an Indian perspective, is on digital infrastructure and transformation. Germany has 4 priorities when it comes to the G7. For India, it's almost inherent and obvious that digital transformation is one of our key concerns that will shape the G20 agenda. Except there's only one problem. Only us in India, or largely us in India, understand what this transformation is about. And I have to say that it's not a story that is necessarily shared with different parts of the world. The statistic that is often brought up is on UPI or is on Aadhaar, but I think there is work to be done to try and make sure that the India model, and today it is an India model, on digital architecture can be made interoperable with different parts of the world, different jurisdictions. So whether it's ONDC, whether it's COWIN, this morning, Mr. R.S. Sharma had, I thought, a fantastic piece on how COWIN is going to pivot to new realities. That platform should be a global platform. UPI should be a global standard. ONDC should be a global e-commerce platform in different parts of the world. And I think this is what India can bring to the table positively for the G20, and this track will be very important. 2 very quick points on a different set of subjects, which is security. 3 very quick points, if you allow me. One is on Afghanistan. There's a war in Central Europe. it looks like that war is going to grind on for a while. But whatever happens, we must not forget that there is a crisis still in Afghanistan. And I think it is important to align, especially from an Indian perspective, is whether it's on humanitarian assistance, whether it's funds, whether it's food, areas that India has taken a lead on. We must continue that through the G7 and through the G20. And there, I think Germany and India are very well placed to move that entire momentum. Second is on Iran. We're living in a universe today where getting oil is becoming almost impossible. I think, if anything, the G20 should and ought to seriously reconsider or push whether it is the EU6 or whether it is the JCPOA in order to do what is necessary to bring Iran back on the table. And I think under India's presidency, I can only guess from the outside that there will be a support for a process such as that. Two functional points. I think the Think 7 is a super avenue. It's a great way. I think our first speaker said something about think tanks. I think we're living in a universe where multilateralism is not just challenged, it is breaking. The way to try and band-aid that as much as possible is the think tank space. So I think if you convert the think tank 7 into a think tank 20, and I will just say perhaps self-serving from an India perspective, led perhaps by RIS on this particular process under India's presidency, I think that will be a very functional way of working through the many tricky points that have been highlighted in the previous, in this particular session. And last functional point is perhaps by too functional, but on the technology side, I think role played by organizations like the OECD are important. They're seconded to the German government as you shepherd your way through the G7. Perhaps we should try and bring them on board to the G20 to shepherd India's way forward because they provide a nice way to connect both these initiatives. Thank you.